Now that we have the structure of our app in place, let's start creating our journal. So there are many different types of data structures, from very simple ones all the way up to rich hierarchies of classes that we could use in Python to represent this. So let's start simple here, and as we get into more complex applications, we'll do something sort of more nuanced. So for our particular journal here, we're going to use just a data structure called a list. A list just holds onto a bunch of pieces of data in particular order. You can access them in order. It automatically grows. So in Python, we create a list like this. Usually you'll see it written like that, open close bracket. That will create a new empty list. You may also see it by calling the class name initializer like so. Those mean exactly the same thing. So here we have our empty journal, and we're going to need to work with the data here, and we're going to need to work with the data there. So let's pass this along. And we'll just go down here and make sure we can pass that data like so. Now for listing entries, let's just cheat for a moment and we'll make this nicer, but we'll just print it out like so. And for adding entries, let's do a little bit of input. So we'll say something like this: text equals input, type your entry. So we'll get this user input and we're going to put it into our data. And the way we add a new item is we say append text. Now we probably want to check this input to make sure something is there, but let's just do this for a moment. Want to list or add an entry. Let's list and see what it looks like. There's our empty list. And let's add a new item. Say this is my first entry. And now let's list it and see if it's there. Excellent. This is my first entry. Let's add another. Say this doesn't look hard at all. Woohoo! Now we can list them again. Notice here's my first entry, and this doesn't look hard at all. And Python even uses the same trick in the case where we have quotes to put double quotes to make it easier for us to understand. Excellent. You can see where we're gathering our data. Obviously, it won't persist across runs yet. That's coming up. But the other thing that is not nice is this is not how our user wants to see it. Maybe a programmer, but definitely not a user. So let's do something nicer on this part. And that brings us to working with loops. Now, we could write a while loop and use a counter or something like that. That would be wrong. It would be what's called non-Pythonic code. In Python, we have a really nice way to work with collections and loops. And those are called for and loops. So we'll say for, and then you name the particular instance of the piece of data you're taking from the collection. So I'll call it entry in data. You write it like this. So for item in a collection, like so, and now you just work with it. So let's say we'll just print it out for a moment. So we'll just say print entry, and let's make it kind of obvious what's going on. So we'll say something like your journal entries, and let's run again. Start by listing them. Your journal entries, there are none. Great. Let's add, say entry 1, add another entry 2. Now let's list them. Okay, your journal entries, entry 1, entry 2. Very cool, huh? Now there's a couple of things we might want to do. We might want to change the order so we see the newest ones first. That's not the way paper journals work, but that's the way a lot of digital ones would work. So let's come over here and we can change the order. There's a really easy way to do that in Python. So let's call our little reversed collection entries, and you can just say reversed, and you give it a collection, and you get the list back in a different order. So now we should, if we run it, see we get items back in the other order. So I'll say thing 1, thing 2. When I list it, we should get thing 2 and then thing 1. Perfect. Now, maybe I'd like to number these, like your first entry is this, your second entry is that, your third entry is such and such. So let's go back to our list entries here. Now, in many languages, they use a index-based loop, what's often called a for loop, and it starts with numbers, and you kind of increment those numbers, and that makes it harder to access, harder and more error-prone to access the actual entry, but it does make it easy to number things. You might think, well, we have to fall back to some kind of while loop with a counter. Not true. Python has a really nice way to work with the index and the item at the same time. So we can go to a collection, and we can come over here and say enumerate. And what this will do is it will modify the collection that is returned, not just return the items, but to pair them with the actual indexes. So let's just print this out and see what we get. It's not going to be the same as it was before. Let's say add 3 things here. Now when we list them out, you'll see we get this sort of parentheses and the index and the item. Now in Python, these are called tuples. So let's go back and modify our loop to work with those tuples. So we can actually define two local variables here, the index and the entry, and Python will take those two items from the tuple and assign them to these two variables. So we can also go over here and change this print statement. So this time we should have a slightly nicer printout. Let's say thing 1, thing 2, thing 3. Now if I list them, you'll see the 0th item is thing 3, because we reversed it. The first item is thing 2, and the second item is thing 1. Now, typically people don't use zero-based indexes, but that's the way Python works. Let's fix it up one more time here. Let's add 1 to our index. All right, so it's more friendly for humans. Your journal entries. Number 1, thing 3. Number 2, thing 2. Number 3, thing 1, right? All reversed. Excellent.